Good morning, everyone. John471 here to discuss the S&P 500. First, allow me to read our disclaimer. Derivatives trading is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. On to what we have today. As mentioned, it's Tuesday, April 22nd. There is not a lot of news on the docket again. We do have the Richmond Fed, which is a regional Fed survey, like a second or third tier number at 10 a.m. In addition to that, we have a few speakers. 9 a.m., Philip Jefferson. 9:30, Patrick Harker. All times are Eastern. We also have at 1:40 Neil Kashkari and Thomas Barkin at 2:30. After the bell, Kugler speaks at 6 p.m. During the belly of the day, there are a few Treasury announcements, including a 2-year note auction at 1, and that pretty much does it for the scheduled news. But as always, keep your CT news feed on for that unscheduled news, which is the fun stuff. Anyway, let's look at our charts. So this is the S&P 500, RTH only, 30-minute bars. Just quickly reviewing what happened yesterday. One of the scenarios that we went over was if we got the bearish action right from the prior week's low. We had extended the prior week's low after the Sunday reopen. And so the look of the stance of the market was pretty bearish. That was our primary expectation. And the question was, do we get a pullback into the 75s, or do we just start to see the selling happen from the prior week's low? And that's what we got. In that scenario, we were looking for a test of the century figure, which happened very quickly, and potential continuation to the singles, which at that time were in the 5146 area. And that's what we got, a little bit of extension, and then we attempted to recover at the end of the day. This was I just want to mention this was a fairly telegraphed trade that I had been kind of looking for a while, like not necessarily the trade or how to get on board. From talking with a lot of people at CT, I think for newer folks, it was a rather difficult trade to get on board because this drive happened so fast and there were no pullbacks. So you had to have planned for it, and you had to know that this is something that could happen if you were going to be able to trade it, because if you weren't ready for it. And so that's why a lot of, I imagine that for those that have kind of watched me for a while, it kind of feels like I go over endless scenarios. But what I'm really doing is I'm preparing for each one of these eventualities, and I'm visualizing, will I engage? Where could I engage? What could the opportunities look like? And so we're ready for this. It happened. And if you were ready for it, there was potentially opportunity to get on board, maybe not, but I thought it was pretty tradable. Anyway, so that's what we got today, and we pushed into here. Why was this telegraphed? Let me just touch on that for a little bit. I've been harping on this 4-9 day that we're stuck inside of, and we had this clear pullback, and every retail investor wants this to be the bottom, and so everyone's looking to sell these highs. And when they don't get the highs right here, just like I kind of explained the psychology of trading this kind of constricting risk reward for the long in this scenario. And then as soon as that music stops, we're going to start retracing lower. And if we don't get this high, we're looking for this low, unless buyers step up like right here or somewhere, but they obviously didn't. And so when we started losing that prior week's low, it was almost like, it was almost, the next tick is always random. However, there are times where you see a sequence starting to play out, and it becomes, and the end of the sequence becomes less random because you're seeing the whole thing start to play out. You're seeing the miss of the high. You're seeing the retracement lower with unauctioned areas left. And you know that, is it random? Could something else happen? Could buyers step up right here? Most certainly, but they didn't. And it could be witnessed that they were not. It could be witnessed that there was nothing but sellers coming in. Let's go on to what we got for today. Regardless, so we broke below the prior week's low. We made an attempt to recover. Made an attempt to recover at the end. We have a fairly weak low hanging out right here. Our VPOC is at the bottom of the range. We have singles left right here, and also smaller singles right here. So some unauctioned areas, there's some overhead to get back into the prior week's range here. Let's take a look at it on a smaller time frame chart and prepare for specific price action. Okay, here we are on a PNF chart. This is a basically a 1 point by 8, 4 ticks by 8 PNF. I wanted to use today to show some of our stock zones, which help guide my trade. But regardless, so what have we seen? We recovered from the drop and we opened our reopen, tested a bit lower, and then just started to push higher through these singles, and we've gotten back up nearly to the RTH high, pushed into touched the prior week's low, and now here we are. So we're going to discuss bearish ideas first, but of course, like anything could happen, you know, the order that we discuss them is less important, but we'll discuss bearish ideas first. And the bearish idea we'll discuss initially is the most bearish idea, which would be if this overnight high holds. Given this overnight high, what we could see, we're opening in the prior IB, which is a stat. So what we could see here, if this overnight high holds, we could just see us, we're pushing into full session VWAP now. I would expect some attempt to kind of like find some buying here, you'd think. But if we don't, regardless, maybe we do, maybe we don't, but I would expect to see continuation lower into this zone. Now this zone right here is fairly important, and I could, if the bulls are really strong, we could find support there. But if we start to lose this area here, I would tend to think that we could retrace to settlement. Now, this whole area between these zones could get very choppy, push higher, and then start to resume. That's a possibility. We'll go over that. It's a bullish possibility. But what we're thinking right now is if this we push into this area and the buyers are not present in the way that they have been. So we're looking at the idea, we push into here, we get into settlement, we make maybe some attempt to get higher. I would not expect us to really get much through full session mid if we're going to continue. And at that point, so I would expect losing this area, getting into settle. If the buyers don't show up, then I would expect continuation lower to take the overnight low. The overnight low. Now here's the thing, at the overnight low, that's definitely a place, what we have to be aware of is we could get that excursion, and then the next question becomes, okay, the overnight low is taken. Do we get a higher low versus yesterday's RTH session, or do we get a lower low? And I think that fight, like how that works, will happen, or how, if we get that, it'll matter a lot in how we treat settlement. Are we able to start to work higher above settlement, or do we just drop lower and get below our full session low and start to extend? If we get below our full session low and settlement and find ourselves unable to get above, I'm looking at what I drew right there, then we'll be looking for yesterday's low. So just going over those bearish targets again, if we start to lose this, then we're looking first for settlement as a key area, and then the overnight low. There's possibility that we could lick check and revert higher above settlement, but if we can't get above settlement, then we're starting to look for yesterday's low. Yesterday's low could definitely be a place where we just kind of drop into it, sort of lick check. This century is basically the 50% point of where our it's like halfway through the singles. So I do think it would be important. But anyway, so we take that low, we could just quickly lick check and then revert higher. And then if we do that, then we're going to have a pretty wide area to just chop around the rest of the day. We might, so that's a possibility. It's kind of what we did yesterday. We pushed lower with an aggressive move. We found our buyers and then just kind of ground higher. So don't be surprised if something like that happens if we do get the low. But if that doesn't happen and we just start to push lower, get into century, try to get back out of the singles and we're unable, then we'll be looking for, well, first, obviously century is a waypoint within the singles. And then if we don't get that, if we keep going lower, what we'll be looking for is Boomtown, 90-day pause, SOC right in the 90s, and the close of the singles. This is a big deal. This is an important area. Also, if you look at your charts in this area, to the left, the 4-9 structure, there is a very solid HVN right here that I believe most participants are expecting to be support. So the expectation, if we close these singles, my initial expectation is support. But we need to be especially aware if that doesn't show up, because as I was mentioning Convergent yesterday, my most certain expectation yesterday was if we got to these singles, we'd see support. And we did kind of. And so my most certain expectation today is if we somehow close the singles, that we would see support. So when I know that when I feel like I'm pretty sure of something, there's a little alarm that goes off that says, hey, be ready for if exactly the opposite happens. So prepare that thought exercise. It would be a lot of excursion. But anyway, that's bearish ideas. If the overnight high holds, what happens if the overnight high gets taken? Could we still go bearish? Yes, we could. What would that look like? It would look like this. Some type of push, maybe we get support, pullback, maybe not. But regardless, we push higher into this area. But what shuts us off? This area, the 5280s. This is my LIS for any bearish ideas. So what this would look like to consider shorts for me, if we take the overnight high, I'd have to see us push, take the overnight high, be unable to get this area, and then I would be looking short on a break lower of this. That's what I would be looking for. And then the rest of what I just said to play out maybe. But that's what I would kind of look like. If we take this overnight high, I'd look for us to push, not be able to get this area, and then just fall out, ideally with an impulse, structured pullback setup, something like that. CT members know what I'm talking about. But that's what I would be looking for. Okay, continuing on, let's discuss bullish ideas because I'm taking too long, as I always do. So what's going on here? Also, AP members will know this trade. If it works out, it's called the big slick. What would happen here? If we get a push lower, testing into this full session VWAP area, and potentially we get to settle. But what I would be looking for in this situation is some type of an impulse. Maybe we touch settle, maybe we don't. Maybe we leave settle untouched. Don't be surprised we leave settlement untouched. But we get an impulse here that really shows us we don't want to trade below 5,200. So we get an impulse higher that shows us we don't want to trade above 5,200. We get back above the 20s with an impulse, then I am looking long for the overnight high. Boom. That would be the target, ideally a scale in here. Now, if we do that, if we get the overnight high, just like I said, potential for a reversion, but if we don't, then I would be open to a little bit of excursion higher to target this area or somewhere close to it, depending on what my position is, for the rest. That would be pretty much the ideal bullish trade in this situation. A test below here, we don't know what's going to happen, then we get the impulse and it signals we can trade long, and we target the overnight high. And with continuation, we're looking to get into the gap zone. Obviously, this area is going to be very key. Like I said, I would be flat or just a runner into this area because I could see this being where the sellers step in. But if the sellers do not step in there, if we don't get this idea that I'm saying is potentially available with sellers above the overnight high, if we don't get that, instead we see stops going off and we see rotations expand higher and we close the gap zone. And after we close the gap zone, we can't get back into the prior range, then I would be open to excursion higher. My next target would be the 5,300s. And from there, I would go zone to zone. There's potential for this to really go if there are buyers, but I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's what's going to happen. It could. That's just an opinion. Don't give it. I'm thinking less it could happen, but I'm going to be ready for it. But regardless, that's what I got for you. What would be our nothing scenario? Let's quickly go over our nothing scenario. We have a lot of range. I would say our nothing scenario would be anything where the 5280s become the ceiling and probably around this zone, the 5150s become the floor. So this would give us a lot of area to just kind of chop around, look like we're going to do one of those two things, but really not get a whole bunch. And this would likely be an outside-in day. There's a lot of room here. How else could we get a nothing day? Well, don't be surprised. We could also get a very quick repricing in either direction if somebody has a lot to do today and just get a nothing day in another location. Like we could just get a push immediately into settlement that then our nothing day ends up being nothing with settlement offered. Maybe we test the low, kind of push back up, can't get through settle, don't really extend. This could be a nothing day that kind of focuses in this area. And as well, we could get a nothing day that just impulses higher into the key target area, but doesn't really give us a trade further and just kind of chops around above yesterday's mid. These are both ways where we could get some targets, but it's not really a day that does anything special with the prior day's range. But anyway, that's what I got for you. 15 minutes. Already went too long. I didn't get a chance to include crude. Our goal here is to tighten this up, make it a little shorter, and eventually include crude oil. We'll get there. But anyway, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope your wonderful day continues. I hope that you found use in this. And if you have found this useful, please like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube and share with a friend if your friend trades, or if he just likes to hear people talk about charts. That could be the reason someone watches this also, even if they don't trade. But that's what I got for you. I hope you're having a wonderful morning. I hope your wonderful morning continues. And most importantly, I hope you find a way to improve your trading today that is not dependent upon your P&L, but is dependent upon your process. That's what I got. Ciao.